Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take a stack of sources, sometimes just one, and really dig in to find the key insights, basically giving you a shortcut to getting informed. Today we're focusing on just one source. It's an audio file, very opinionated, called The Secret of the Russian Spy Ship, Exposed.mp3.
That's right. And our mission for you today is to, well, unpack the main claims, the accusations, the viewpoints presented in this specific piece. It was a, let's say, particular view on things, from U.S. politics to global events. We'll explore what it puts forward as, facts and important developments.
Okay, sounds like quite a source. Let's unpack this. So right off the bat, this source dives into some pretty high-octane political claims.
It doesn't waste any time, no.
First up, it talks about General Flynn resigning as National Security Advisor. The source claims it's because he, and this is their phrase, pissed off the trifecta.
The trifecta. And who does the source say that is?
Specifically, former Defense Secretary Mattis, the vice president, and others on the National Security Council. It describes the resignation itself as mutual, and even adds this detail that Flynn had apparently turned down a huge job at Jones Group just before taking the NSA position.
Okay, so it's building a specific narrative around that event. It's interesting how quickly it sets that tone, isn't it?
Yeah.
A tone of deep mistrust, framing things as deliberate actions, clear good guys and bad guys in its view.
Yeah, definitely.
This us versus them feeling comes through straight away. And notice how it presents these details, like the Jones Group job, almost as insider information, aiming to sound credible.
And sticking with Flynn for a moment, the source has a really strong opinion on the idea that the president, or president-elect back then, couldn't talk to Russians.
Yes. What does it say about that?
It calls the whole idea a big joke.
Yeah.
Says emphatically they can talk to anybody they want to because, quote, it's called being the president.
Right. A very direct dismissal of any controversy around those contacts.
Then it shifts gears, but stays on, let's say, highly charged territory. This time about Hillary Clinton.
Okay, what's the claim there?
A really strong assertion that Clinton and her people took a bunch of money and essentially gave away U.S. uranium.
The Uranium One story, revisited?
Exactly. The source says 20%, or it corrects itself, actually 30% of U.S. uranium.
That's a very specific and large number.
It is, and it claims even the New York Times admits that cash flowed to Clinton Foundation amid Russian uranium deal, but then it immediately attacks the media for denying the story's truth, saying it's a 100% true.
So it acknowledges a mainstream source, but only to bolster its own point,
Right.
while simultaneously discrediting the broader media. That's a common tactic we see.
And it doesn't stop there. It calls for action against Clinton, saying she's not going to stop. The Soros Group isn't going to stop.
Right, bringing in other figures often targeted in these kinds of narratives.
Yeah.
It's important, like you said, to see how it uses existing controversies and presents these very specific, often sensational figures as just hard facts. Absolute certainty. That's the key feature here, regardless of what other sources might say.
So moving on from those initial claims, the source broadens its scope. It starts talking about internal opposition and gives a pretty unique take on Trump himself.
Okay, internal opposition. How does it frame that?
It alleges illegal spying. Flat out states they know they were spying on him at that time through the Justice Department illegally.
They being.
Well, it gets specific, saying the president being spied on by Obama.
Okay, so a direct accusation against the previous administration.
Yeah. And to back this up, it brings in Buchanan, quoting him, saying, the deep state's trying to take Trump out.
The deep state narrative. For anyone listening who isn't familiar, in this kind of context, that usually means, well, a hidden group within government, unelected, working against the elected leadership. That's the idea the source is pushing.
And it even mentions Priebus on the hook for anti-Trump sabotage, apparently referencing an InfoWars piece. So implicating specific individuals in this supposed sabotage.
InfoWars mentioned again. That tells you something about the source's alignment.
Then there's this really interesting pivot about Trump's personality.
Oh, what's the claim?
It draws a real distinction. It says, the Trump you see on TV is like the Trump talking to the 5-year-olds.
Okay.
But behind the scenes, the source claims he's incredibly smart, able to finish your sentences, describes him as a big egghead.
A big egghead. So the argument is that his public persona is just an act.
Pretty much. And this hidden intelligence, according to the source, is why they're freaking out about him, why there's this opposition.
That's fascinating. It creates this narrative of like a hidden genius, right? A strategic mind that his opponents fear. definitely adds another layer to the U.S. versus them story the source is building.
Yeah, it really does. It makes you think about how these narratives of hidden forces and secret personas get constructed, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And what that says about the perceived battle for truth, as the source sees it.
So we've got internal politics, alleged spying, secret personas. How does the source tie this all together on a global scale? What's the bigger picture it's painting?
Well, it definitely shifts to this larger stage. It starts talking about a global battle, connecting events to what it calls a globalist agenda.
Globalist. That term carries a lot of weight in these kinds of discussions.
It does. And the source uses it to frame a pretty dire picture. It warns the globalists would like to take us towards, well, really dangerous outcomes. The speaker even mentions a visual of nuclear weapons going off.
Wow, so nuclear conflict is part of this alleged agenda.
That's the implication. It talks about a civil war going on with the globalists commanding their hordes of idiots and the horrible traitor media. Very strong combative language.
And how does it connect this to actual international bodies or events?
It criticizes NATO and the EU directly. It mentions the EU's globalist boss Juncker, wanting the EU to handle its own defense. But then claims this is undermined by another EU bigwig who'd rather help the migrants. This, the source argues, is a deliberate plan to flood Europe and destroy Europe.
So migration policy is framed as a weapon used by these globalists.
Exactly. It questions the point of NATO and the EU if, in its view, they're being used to destroy Europe, calling them criminal groups.
And it doesn't stop with political bodies, right? Didn't it mention a tech figure?
Yes. Mark Zuckerberg. It singles him out, saying Zuckerberg is God, and declares a fight against him.
Zuckerberg is God. What does that even mean in this context?
It's hyperbolic, obviously, but seems to imply immense, almost unchecked power. It then calls his thinking Machiavellian, suggesting he's cunning, ruthless, maybe willing to do terrible things for power.
So basically, the source sees politicians, international groups, tech leaders, migration. It's all part of one big conflict driven by these so-called globalists.
That's the narrative structure, yes. It helps interpret everything through that specific lens of threat and alliance.
Okay, but the title of the source file is The Secret of the Russian Spy Ship Exposed. We should really talk about the ship itself. What does it actually say?
The spy ship. Well, interestingly, it does acknowledge the Pentagon view first. Says the Pentagon sees it as not a direct threat.
Okay, so it mentions the official line.
It does, but then it immediately pivots. It counters by saying the U.S. has like 100 or more similar ships around Russia.
Implying hypocrisy? Or just that it's normal?
Both,
Yeah.
kind of. The implication is that's what you do. It's standard intelligence gathering, so why the fuss about the Russian ship? It downplays the specific threat while normalizing the general practice, especially when the U.S. does it.
A classic reframing technique, then.
Exactly. Acknowledge, then pivot, and recontextualize within your own narrative.
Does it mention any other Russia-related interactions?
It does. It highlights an upcoming big meeting between U.S. and Russian generals in Azerbaijan. Notes it's the first time since the 3-year-old situation in Ukraine.
And where does it say it got that info?
It cites International Business Times and, again, InfoWars.
Okay. And there was one more specific, quite provocative claim linked to intelligence, wasn't there?
Ah, yes. Very specific. Citing InfoWars and someone called Dr. Corsi, the source claims that Muslim sympathizers at the CIA behind Trump leaks.
Wow.
Yeah. And it specifically mentions John O'Brennan in connection with this. That's a particularly loaded accusation tying leaks to a specific religious group identity within the CIA.
Definitely raises red flags.
Yeah.
So from global plots and spy ships, the source then turns its attention to the information landscape itself, right? The media, the internet.
Yes, the final part really focuses on what it sees as an info war, a battleground for truth.
How does it characterize the mainstream media?
Well, it claims Trump downgrades fake news CNN to very fake news. It even suggests a new term, fake stream news, instead of mainstream news.
Fake stream news. Okay. And what about social media? Does it see that differently?
It has very strong claims about censorship, particularly on Twitter.
What kind of censorship?
It alleges Twitter actively suppresses support for Trump, allowing only comical or attacking comments to get through, basically to demoralize supporters.
How would that even work?
It claims Twitter manipulates the feeds, so if you look at Trump's account, you only see hundreds and hundreds of negatives at the top, and that trending topics don't trend unless they're anti-Trump or sarcastic.
And it gives a time frame for this alleged shift.
Yeah, it says this started about 3 weeks ago relative to when the audio was recorded and claims it's affecting Drudge, too.
But it contrasts Twitter with YouTube?
It does. It claims YouTube shows massive support, cites things like 99% ratings based on every video, and billions of views total, arguing this shows his real popularity despite what Twitter might suggest.
So a narrative of suppression on one platform, huge support on another?
Exactly. And this all builds up to a wider warning.
Which is?
The source states, quite bluntly, communist Chinese-style net censorship is coming to the web because it's already here.
That's a dramatic claim. Does it elaborate?
He uses some pretty stark historical analogies. Compares the situation to Tokyo Rose as Japan was already defeated, still broadcasting victory messages.
Okay.
And even Hitler in his bunker thinking he was winning while the Russians were closing in. So really trying to convey a sense of severe delusion or deception by those controlling information.
Powerful imagery, intended to sound an alarm.
Definitely. And this leads directly into the source's call to action. It urges listeners to get involved more than ever, to keep the internet open and free.
And promotes a specific platform?
Yes, it promotes Infowars.com map as a, quote, new battleship in the fight.
Right. So that final section really cements the source's core idea. There's an active information war, and the platforms themselves are battlegrounds or even weapons.
Precisely. And it frames itself and platforms like Infowars as being on the front lines of that fight for open and free information as it gains it.
Which, as you said, raises that crucial question for anyone listening. When a source frames the entire information system as biased or controlled, how do you, the listener, navigate that? How do you figure out what's verifiable?
It's a key challenge in today's media landscape.
Well, that was certainly a deep dive into one very specific and passionate perspective on, well, pretty much everything.
Yeah.
We went from political resignations, alleged corruption, these globalist plots, all the way to this perceived info war online, all through the lens of this single audio source.
It definitely presents a coherent, if highly controversial, narrative. A story of ongoing conflicts, hidden agendas, deep mistrust of established institutions, the works. It challenges a lot of conventional views on power and media.
And our goal here, just to be clear, was simply to lay out the claims and perspectives within that source, to show you how this kind of material constructs its arguments, not to endorse them. Hopefully it's given you some insight into that process.
So maybe something to think about is, what really stood out to you from this source? Did its style, its claims, challenge how you think about information? Or did it confirm things you already suspected? How does hearing this kind of narrative affect your understanding of how ideas, especially contentious ones, spread?
Something to mull over for sure. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
We'll be back soon with another exploration of sources just for you.